My Dutch friend once told me about an American tourist who stared at the narrow canal houses and asked, "Why are all these buildings so thin and leaning? Don't you guys have safety regulations?" My friend patiently explained the history, how houses were taxed by width, how the land slowly sank over centuries, how the canals shaped the architecture. The tourist waved it off and said, "That just sounds like an excuse for bad design. Back home in Texas, our buildings are big, straight, and solid. That's how God meant them to be." I used to work as a tour guide at the Colosseum in Rome. One American couple on my tour looked increasingly irritated. Eventually, the husband pulled me aside and said, "We paid a lot of money for this. This is unacceptable." I asked what was wrong. He pointed at the Colosseum and said, "It's falling apart. Why haven't you fixed it?" There are holes everywhere. In the US, and we preserve our historical sites. This just feels lazy. He was completely serious. When I was a university student in Spain, there was an American exchange student in my class who struggled with the coursework. One day she raised her hand and complained to the professor, "I don't understand why we have to study all this Spanish history. It has nothing to do with us. When are we going to learn about American history, like the Alamo?" The professor, an expert on the Spanish Civil War, looked at her calmly and said, "In your American history class in America, do you study Spanish history?" I once worked in a luxury watch boutique in Switzerland. An American customer examined our most expensive watches, then pulled out his phone and showed me his Apple Watch. "This does everything your watches do, but better," he said. "It has apps. It tracks my steps. It reminds me to breathe. Why would anyone pay thousands for an outdated clock?" He then asked if we could add a fitness tracker to a Patek Philippe. A friend of mine worked as a server in a traditional pub in Dublin. A group of American tourists came in, and one woman loudly announced she wanted an authentic Irish coffee. My friend made the classic version: hot coffee, Irish whiskey, sugar, and cream. She took one sip and frowned. "Where's the Baileys? And the green stuff?" she said. "I've had real Irish coffee at Applebee's in Ohio, and this tastes nothing like it. Are you sure you're Irish?" While traveling through Vietnam, I met an American man who complained constantly about the food. "They have all the ingredients for a decent sandwich," he said, "but they just refuse to make one properly." He said he asked for turkey, Swiss cheese, and white bread, and the locals looked confused. "It's like they don't even want my money," he said. "How hard is it to make a normal sandwich?" I once overheard an American man on a train between Brussels and Amsterdam loudly talking on his phone. "Yeah, I'm in Belgium," he said. "That's the capital of France, right? Or maybe Germany. Hard to tell. They all talk funny English here. I'm heading to Holland later. That's where the Swedes live, I think. I want one of those pastries." The entire train car sat in stunned silence. At a Michelin star restaurant in Lyon, France, an American family was seated next to me. After reading the menu, the father called over the sommelier. He didn't ask for a wine recommendation. Instead, he said, "Do you have Bud Light or maybe Coors? And could we get some ranch dressing for the bread?" The sommelier froze for a moment before politely saying no. A friend of mine is a park ranger in the Canadian Rockies. One day, an American tourist stopped him and asked, "What time do you turn the waterfalls off at night?" My friend explained that the waterfalls run all the time. The tourist looked confused and said, "In Las Vegas, they shut the fountains down to save energy. Seems wasteful to let all that water run when nobody's watching." A new American manager once joined our office in Sydney. In his first company-wide meeting, he announced a bold new policy. "To build a stronger, more competitive culture," he said, "we're eliminating sick days. If you're not hospitalized, you're expected to work." He was shocked when HR informed him that this was not only unpopular but illegal. I was visiting a quiet onsen in rural Japan. where signs everywhere asked guests to remain silent. An American tourist walked in talking loudly on speakerphone. Then he tried to order pizza delivery to the hot spring. When staff gently told him this wasn't possible, he shouted, "I'm a paying customer. This is a resort. Get your manager." My cousin works with the Icelandic Coast Guard. He once told me about a distress call from an American tourist who claimed his car was being attacked by a hurricane. A rescue team rushed out only to find the man parked safely on the roadside during a normal windy day. He was from Arizona and had never experienced strong wind before. In a cafe in Vienna, I overheard an American student complaining to her friend. "This place is so obsessed with Mozart," she said. "All this old classical stuff is boring." Why aren't there statues of Taylor Swift? She's way more important to music history than some guy in a powdered wig. At a hotel front desk in Norway, an American guest called down furious because the sun was still shining at 11 p.m. He demanded a different room or a refund. I had to explain the concept of the midnight sun to a grown man who believed the sunlight was a malfunction of the hotel. A friend in the UK once joked to an American student that Wales was basically a medieval theme park. The student believed him completely. For weeks, he asked things like, "What time does Wales open?" And, "Do you need tickets for the castles?" He was planning his visit before someone finally explained that Wales is an actual country. At a market in Morocco, an American tourist tried to negotiate the price of a rug by saying, "I'll give you $20 US. That's probably more than you make in a year." The vendor, who owned multiple shops and spoke several languages, smiled politely and sold the rug to someone else. On a flight to Cairo, an American woman asked the flight attendant if the pyramids would be visible from the plane. When told yes, she followed up with, "Are those the pointy ones or the square ones?" I always mix them up with the ones in South America. My sister teaches at an international school in Italy. During a geography lesson, she pointed to Italy on the map. An American student raised his hand and said, "I thought Italy was shaped like a boot." "That doesn't look like a boot, it just looks like a leg." "Are you sure that map is right?" I once worked in a pub in Liverpool. An American tourist asked me, "Where's the place the Beatles are from?" I said, "You're in it." He looked confused and replied, "No, I mean the city, the one from the songs." He thought Liverpool was just the name of the bar. In Berlin, an American tourist stood in front of the remaining section of the Berlin Wall and asked the guide, "So which side was the good side and which was the bad side?" When the guide began explaining history, the tourist interrupted and said, "Just tell me which side was the US side. That's obviously the good one." At a wine tasting in Bordeaux, the host explained how soil, climate, and environment influence wine flavor. An American raised his hand and asked, "That's a cool story, but what brand of grape juice do you mix in to get the taste? Is it Welch's?" A friend who works at the Anne Frank House in Amsterdam told me the most common question he hears from American tourists is, if they were hiding, why did they write a book about it? He has to explain the difference between a diary and a published book almost every day. While visiting Pompeii, I heard an American teenager complain, "This place is boring. It's just rocks. Why couldn't it have been buried by something cool?" His father tried to explain that it was, in fact, buried by a volcano. On a safari in Kenya, an American tourist asked the guide if he could get out and pet the lions. When told no, he protested, "I'm American, I have rights." This is bad customer service. At a restaurant in South Korea, an American man struggled with chopsticks. When the waiter offered a fork, he slammed the chopsticks down and said, "No, I want to eat authentically. But these things are terribly designed. You should make them easier to use." I once worked at a gift shop near the Tower of London. An American tourist asked if the Queen still lived there. When I said no, he asked, "So is this her party castle, like a vacation house?" A friend in India told me about a conference call with a new American manager who said, Okay, team, let's build synergy. First question, who's the chief and who are the Indians? There was a long silence before someone had to explain why that phrase was wildly